Have you ever noticed that the same people always seem to be struggling with money? Not because they're lazy, not because they're stupid, not even because they don't make enough money. I'm talking about people who work hard, sometimes multiple jobs, who genuinely want to get ahead, but somehow year after year they're still broke, still stressed about bills, still one emergency away from complete financial disaster. And here's the thing that's going to sound controversial, but needs to be said. It's not about how much money they make. I've seen people making $30,000 a year build wealth, and I've seen people making $80,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck, constantly broke, constantly stressed. So, what's actually going on here? Why do some people escape poverty while others seem permanently trapped no matter how hard they work? My name is Rob, and I've spent years studying why people make the financial decisions they do, and I've discovered something that completely changed how I think about poverty and wealth. If you want to understand the real reasons people stay poor, and more importantly, how to escape that trap, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because what I'm about to explain is something most financial advisors won't tell you. The real reason most people stay poor has almost nothing to do with income and everything to do with something called survival mode. And once you understand how this works, you'll see poverty completely differently. You'll understand why traditional financial advice doesn't work for people who are broke, and you'll understand exactly what needs to happen to break the cycle. Let me start by explaining what I mean by survival mode, because this is the key to understanding everything else. When you have no money saved, when you're living paycheck to paycheck, when you're constantly worried about how you're going to pay your bills, your brain literally cannot think about the future. This isn't a metaphor. This is actual neuroscience. Studies have shown that financial stress reduces cognitive function in measurable ways. When you're worried about money, your brain is consumed with immediate survival. Where is my next meal coming from? How am I going to pay rent? What happens if my car breaks down? This constant state of anxiety uses up all your mental bandwidth. You don't have the cognitive space to think about long-term planning, about investing, about building wealth. You're just trying to survive until Friday when your paycheck hits. This is why telling a broke person to invest in index funds or start a retirement account is completely useless advice. It's not that they don't understand that investing is important, it's that their brain literally cannot prioritize something that won't help them survive this week. When you're in survival mode, everything becomes about right now. Right now, I need to eat. Right now, I need to keep the lights on. Right now, I need to get to work, which means I need my car to not break down. The future is a luxury that broke people cannot afford to think about, which creates this terrible trap where the very thing that would help them build wealth, thinking long term, is impossible because they're stuck in short-term survival mode. And here's where it gets even worse. When you're in survival mode, you make decisions that make logical sense for immediate survival, but are terrible for long-term wealth building. You can't afford to buy a $200 pair of work boots that will last 5 years, so you buy the $40 pair that will fall apart in 6 months. Over 5 years, you'll spend $400 on cheap boots instead of $200 on good ones, but you didn't have the $200 up front, so you're trapped paying more in the long run. This applies to everything. You can't afford to buy groceries in bulk at Costco, even though it's cheaper per unit, because you don't have $300 for a month's worth of food. You need to spend $100 per week at the regular grocery store, which means you'll spend $400 for the same amount of food, but you can't access the bulk discount because you don't have the upfront cash. You can't afford to invest in education or certifications that would increase your earning potential because you need every dollar you make right now just to survive. Someone with money in the bank can spend $2,000 on a certification that leads to a $10,000 raise. That's an incredible return on investment. But when you're broke, you can't access that opportunity. You're stuck in your current job at your current income level because you can't afford to invest in yourself. This is what I call the opportunity cost of being broke. It's not just that you're not building wealth, it's that you're missing out on opportunities that would help you build wealth because you can't afford the entry price. Then there's what I call the poverty tax, which is one of the most infuriating aspects of being poor. Being poor is expensive, like genuinely more expensive than being middle class or wealthy. Let me give you some examples that will probably make you angry because they should make you angry. Overdraft fees. If you're wealthy and you accidentally overdraw your account, who cares? You have money in another account. You transfer some funds, no big deal. If you're poor and you overdraw by $5 because you miscalculated by a few dollars, you get hit with a $35 overdraft fee. You just paid $35 because you were $5 short. That's a 700% penalty for being poor. Banks literally make billions of dollars every year from overdraft fees, and it's almost entirely from people who are already struggling financially. The people with money don't pay overdraft fees. The people without money get hammered with them constantly. Credit cards and loans. If you have good credit and money in the bank, you can get a credit card with a 15% interest rate, maybe lower. If you're poor with bad credit, you're looking at 25%, 29%, maybe even higher. The people who can least afford to pay interest are charged the highest rates. Or even worse, they can't get traditional credit at all, so they end up at payday loan places paying 400% APR, literally 400% annual percentage rate for people who are so desperate for money that they have no other options. This is legal, by the way. We live in a society where it's perfectly legal to charge desperate people 400% interest. Housing is another example. If you can afford to buy a house, you're building equity. Your housing payment is going towards something you own. If you're poor and you rent, you're paying someone else's mortgage, building their wealth instead of yours. And rental prices are often similar to or higher than mortgage payments. But you can't get a mortgage because you don't have money saved for a down payment, and maybe your credit isn't perfect. Transportation is brutal too. If you can afford to buy a reliable used car in cash, you pay maybe $8,000 and you own it. Done. No interest, no monthly payments. If you're poor, you probably can't afford $8,000 up front, so you get a car loan with terrible terms because your credit is bad. You end up paying $12,000 total for that same $8,000 car because of interest. Or worse, you get stuck in the buy here, pay here car lot trap where you're paying $400 a month for a 15-year-old car that keeps breaking down, and if you miss a payment, they repossess it immediately and you're out all the money you already paid. Healthcare is insane. If you're poor, you probably don't have good health insurance. Maybe you have a high deductible plan or no insurance at all. So you avoid going to the doctor for small problems because you can't afford the copay or the bill. Those small problems become big problems. That pain in your tooth that could have been fixed with a $150 filling becomes an infection that requires a $2,000 root canal and crown. But you can't afford that either, so you end up in the emergency room with a life-threatening infection and a $15,000 bill, Suntory's 8 years, 1120. Everything costs more when you're poor. It's like the entire economic system is designed to keep poor people poor and make wealthy people wealthier, which honestly, it kind of is. But that's a whole other video. The psychological effects of all this are devastating, and they create what I call the downward spiral. When you're constantly stressed about money, you don't sleep well. You lie awake at night worrying about bills, about what happens if your car breaks down, about how you're going to afford groceries next week. This lack of sleep affects everything. Your health deteriorates. You're more likely to get sick, which means missing work, which means less money, which creates more stress. Your job performance suffers. When you're exhausted and stressed, you can't focus. You make mistakes, you're less productive. This makes you less likely to get raises or promotions. It might even put your job at risk. Meanwhile, the person who's not stressed about money shows up well-rested, performs better, gets the promotion, gets the raise. The gap widens. Your relationships suffer. Money stress is one of the leading causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're constantly worried about survival, you're irritable, you're anxious, you have less patience for your kids, your partner, your friends. This creates relationship problems that add even more stress to your life. You might lose important support systems right when you need them most. Your health gets worse. Financial stress is linked to high blood pressure, heart disease, depression, anxiety, and a whole host of other health problems. These health problems lead to medical bills you can't afford, which creates more financial stress, which makes your health worse. It's a vicious cycle. The truly devastating part is that all of this affects your decision making ability. When you're stressed, exhausted, and in survival mode, you make worse decisions. You take the first job offer you get instead of negotiating or holding out for something better. You agree to terrible loan terms because you're desperate. You don't have the mental energy to shop around for better deals on anything. You're just trying to survive. This is what I call fear-based decision making, and it's one of the biggest reasons people stay trapped in poverty. When you have no financial cushion, every decision is made from a place of fear and desperation rather than strategy and opportunity. Let me give you a specific example. Imagine you're working a job you hate. Your boss is terrible. The pay is mediocre. You're miserable every single day, but you have no savings. You're living paycheck to paycheck. A recruiter contacts you about a potentially better job at a different company. If you had money saved, you might take the interview. You might negotiate hard for a higher salary because you don't desperately need this job. You have options. You might even quit your current job without having another one lined up if you found something entrepreneurial you wanted to pursue. But when you have no savings, you can't take those risks. You can't quit even to pursue a better opportunity because missing even one paycheck could lead to disaster. You can't negotiate hard because you're afraid they'll move on to someone else. And you need a job, any job. You're trapped in the job you have because you can't afford the risk of trying to find something better. This same dynamic plays out in every area of life. You can't move to a city with better job opportunities because you can't afford the moving costs and the risk of not immediately finding work. You can't start a business because you can't afford to fail. You can't invest in stocks because you can't afford to lose money if the market drops. Fear-based decision-making keeps you in place. It prevents you from taking the calculated risks that often lead to wealth building. Meanwhile, people with money can take those risks, they can invest and wait out market downturns. They can quit jobs to pursue better opportunities. They can move for better careers. They can start businesses knowing that if it fails, they'll be okay. The safety net allows for strategic thinking instead of survival thinking. Here's what's really interesting, though, and this is the part that gives me hope. The amount of money you need to escape survival mode and start thinking strategically is not nearly as much as you might think. It's not $1 million. It's not even 100,000. The magic number, the amount that changes everything, is about $1,000 to $2,000. Studies have shown that having just $1,000 in emergency savings fundamentally changes how people make financial decisions. It's not enough to solve all your problems. You're not rich with $1,000 in the bank, but it's enough to get your brain out of constant survival mode. It's enough that you can start thinking beyond this week, beyond this month. With $1,000 saved, that unexpected car repair doesn't feel like the end of the world. It's still annoying. It still sucks. But it doesn't trigger a full-blown financial crisis that sends you into a panic. That small buffer, that tiny cushion, creates mental space for you to start thinking strategically instead of just surviving. This is why the first goal for anyone trying to escape poverty shouldn't be investing in index funds or buying real estate or starting a business. It should be saving $1,000, just $1,000. That's it, because that $1,000 changes your brain. It gets you out of survival mode. Once you're out of survival mode, everything else becomes possible. You can start thinking about the future. You can start looking for better job opportunities without the desperation of needing to take the first thing that comes along. You can invest in yourself, taking courses or getting certifications, because you have a small cushion that makes that investment feel less risky. You can start buying things that save money in the long run instead of just buying whatever is cheapest right now. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. Getting that first $1,000 saved when you're living paycheck to paycheck is incredibly hard. It might be one of the hardest things you ever do financially. You're going to have to make sacrifices, real sacrifices, not the fake sacrifices that financial gurus talk about, like skipping your daily latte. I'm talking about actual difficult choices. You might need to take on a side hustle, working nights or weekends on top of your regular job. You might need to sell stuff you own. You might need to cut your spending to the bone for a few months. And I mean, really cut it. No eating out, no entertainment expenses, no new clothes, nothing that isn't absolutely essential. This is going to suck. Let me be very clear about that. It's going to be hard and it's going to feel unfair because it is unfair. People who were born into money or who got lucky don't have to go through this, but dwelling on the unfairness doesn't change your situation. You can be right about it being unfair, or you can focus on getting out of the trap. You can't do both. The good news is that it gets easier. Saving your first $500 is brutal. Saving the second $500 is noticeably less brutal. Saving your second $1,000 is easier than the first. This isn't just psychological, though. That's part of it. It's also practical. Once you have some money saved, you stop paying the poverty tax quite as much. You have fewer overdraft fees. You can buy things on sale instead of paying full price when you run out. You can fix small problems before they become expensive emergencies. There's a compound effect that works in your favor once you get started, but you have to get started. And this is where most people fail. They know they should save. They understand the concept. They even make plans to start, but then life happens. An unexpected expense comes up. They need that money right now. They tell themselves they'll start saving next month. Next month comes another expense, another reason to delay. This is the trap. There will always be something. There will always be a reason to spend the money instead of saving it. You have to decide that building this emergency fund is more important than anything else for the next few months, more important than having fun, more important than looking good, more important than eating at restaurants or buying new things. Let me be real with you about something else. Your friends and family might not support this. They might think you're being cheap or stingy. They might not understand why you can't go out with them or why you're working all the time. This is especially true if everyone around you is also broke and also in survival mode. People in survival mode don't understand why you're prioritizing something months in the future when there are things you could enjoy right now. You might need to distance yourself from people who are pulling you back into survival mode thinking. This sounds harsh, but it's true. If you're trying to save money and your friends are constantly pressuring you to spend money you don't have, those friends are keeping you poor. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but the effect is the same. The other thing nobody talks about is the identity shift required to escape poverty. You can't just change your behavior. You have to change how you think about yourself. Most people see themselves as the kind of person who's bad with money or someone who's just always broke. As long as that's your identity, you'll find ways to stay broke even if you temporarily save some money. You need to start seeing yourself as someone who has money saved, someone who makes strategic financial decisions, someone who's building wealth. This identity shift is uncomfortable because it requires you to admit that your previous choices were keeping you stuck. It requires you to take responsibility for changing your situation instead of blaming external factors. And yes, external factors matter. The system is absolutely rigged against poor people. That's real. That's true. But you can acknowledge that the system is unfair while also taking action to escape it. These things aren't mutually exclusive. Here's what's interesting about breaking out of poverty. It's not actually about the money. The money is a tool. What you're really breaking out of is the scarcity mindset, the belief that there's never enough, the constant fear that you're one disaster away from losing everything, the inability to think beyond immediate survival. Once you break out of that mindset, even if you only have $1,000 or $2,000 saved, opportunities start appearing that you couldn't see before, not because the opportunities are new, but because your brain can now recognize them. You're not in constant panic mode. You can think strategically. You can take calculated risks. You can invest in yourself. I've seen this transformation happen dozens of times. Someone saves their first $1,000 and suddenly They start noticing that their job is underpaying them, and they have the confidence to ask for a raise or look for something better. They realize they're being charged too much for car insurance, and they actually take the time to shop around. They see an opportunity to learn a valuable skill, and they take it because they have a small cushion that makes it feel less risky. The compound effect starts working in their favor instead of against them. Better sleep leads to better health. Better health leads to better job performance. Better job performance leads to raises and promotions. More money leads to more opportunities to build wealth. The upward spiral begins. But it all starts with that first $1,000 to $2,000 that gets you out of survival mode. That's the key. That's the unlock. Everything else builds from there. Without that buffer, you're stuck in the cycle. With it, the cycle can be broken. Now, I know what some people are thinking. Rob, I literally cannot save $1,000. I've tried. There's nothing left to cut. I'm barely surviving as it is. And for some people, that might be true. Some people are in situations where no amount of budgeting or side hustling will create extra money to save. If that's you, the answer isn't to give up. The answer is that you need to increase your income, not just cut expenses. This might mean getting a better job, which is hard when you're in survival mode. It might mean moving to a place with lower cost of living, which is also hard. It might mean making major life changes that feel impossible. But staying in survival mode forever isn't an option either. You have to find a way to break the cycle, even if that way is really difficult. For most people, though, and I do mean most, there's usually some combination of cutting expenses and increasing income that can generate $50 to $100 per month to put towards savings. It might take 10 months to save $1,000 at that rate. That feels like forever when you're broke. But 10 months passes whether you save the money or not. You can be in the same place 10 months from now, or you can have $1,000 saved and be out of survival mode. The choice is yours. And I know that sounds like typical self-help BS, but it's true. Nobody else is going to save that money for you. The system isn't going to change to make it easier. You have to decide that getting out of survival mode is important enough to make sacrifices for. So here's my challenge to you. If you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, if you're in survival mode, make getting to $1,000 in savings your only financial goal for the next few months. Not investing, not paying off debt beyond minimums, not buying a house, just $1,000 in an account you don't touch except for real emergencies. Cut everything you can, work extra if you can, sell stuff if you need to, do whatever it takes, because that $1,000 is going to change your life more than you can imagine right now. It's going to get you out of survival mode. It's going to let your brain start thinking about the future instead of just surviving today. And once you're out of survival mode, once you have that small buffer, everything else becomes possible. You can start building real wealth. You can start making strategic decisions instead of desperate ones. You can start moving up instead of just treading water. The real reason most people stay poor isn't that they don't make enough money. It's that they're trapped in survival mode, and survival mode makes wealth building impossible. But survival mode can be broken with a relatively small amount of money. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes to save that money. Because if you can get yourself out of survival mode, you'll look back on this as the moment everything changed. The moment you went from being stuck to being someone who builds wealth. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, but it's possible. And that possibility is worth fighting for.